All right, so Standard 19 is our World War II information. So we started from the initial U.S. involvement, not necessarily as in regards to fighting to start with, but with the Lend Lease Act, and we talked about how we initially were requesting, money in return for war materials, or tanks, planes, boats, ammunition, guns, anything that we were trying to make a profit over to help us get out of the Great Depression. And then uh, we said, okay, well, as the allied nations started to not have the funds, then we would work out deals like, we give you these battleships for these military bases, or to lease the military bases. And then it just became, well, we'll just lend it to you because we're more on your side. And so we may not be fully in the war, but it's a way that we can help our allies. Then, when we had the attack at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, we talked about why they would do that, and how there was the need for oil and the embargo that was placed on Japan by the United States, and how the Japanese used a surprise attack despite saying, that they were still our allies. We were still at peace. They attacked Pearl Harbor, which brought the U.S. Into the war. The next battle that we mentioned was the Battle of Midway, and we said that this was the turning point in the Pacific. This was the U.S.'s response to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. So the sinking of the aircraft carriers was a big part of that battle. And then we said, okay, well, what else, kind of was the Pacific theater? So the portion that was fought in Asia, or Southeast Asia, in the Pacific locations. And so we said that there was a big push to ration in the United States. And so a way to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not going and fighting in the war, but I can help right here where I am. And so it was such a long distance to take food and supplies into, in many cases, a subtropical climate, that there was a need to ration by the U.S. citizens. And then the end of the Pacific theater portion, and the official end of World War II, was the dropping of the atomic bombs. And we talked about the Manhattan Project and how it was done in secrecy, and how many people that were working on the Manhattan Project really didn't even know that that's what they were doing. They knew that they were assisting in the war effort, and whatever it was that their job was, that's what they did, and that's all they really needed to know. But in the end, it changed history, and because now you had the nuclear age that emerges post World War II, and we'll get more into that in Standard 20. Now, in the European theater, we said that D-Day was critical, and we saw the clip of just how difficult it was to take even a segment of the beaches of Normandy, France, but that this did allow a launch point for the rest of the attacks in Europe to be able to regain um, the entire continent of Europe from Germany and the Axis powers. And then the fall of Berlin, we discussed how this was supposed to be a Soviet and U.S. combined effort, but that the Soviets went in earlier than was agreed upon, mainly to try to gain, the glory for taking down Hitler and the whole really German Empire at that point. And so that ended the European theater. Then we kind of tied in some of the ideas of shifting factories to be able to make wartime materials, that women were now taking the opportunity available to work in what would previously be exclusively men's occupations. We talked about the that information from Red Tails, with your first African American group of pilots, and the contributions of African Americans in the war. And then we also mentioned the need, or the perceived need by Roosevelt, to have Japanese internment camps, and that it was majority Japanese Americans because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And we debated and discussed the difference between internment camps and concentration camps, and how the treatment of the individuals in the internment camps was not an ideal scenario, but in no way was it a concentration camp. And that is World War II.